I still remember the moment everything changed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, and yet it felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. 1 second, my life was ordinary. Familiar routines, soft promises, a future I thought was safe. And then, in the blink of an eye, I found myself staring at a truth so cruel that it made me question everything I had ever believed. People say betrayal comes like a storm, sudden and violent, but for me it arrived like a whisper. A detail out of place. A shadow where none should be. At first I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking, that love was stronger than doubt. But deep down, a part of me knew. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, in the way my chest tightened when he smiled a little too easily, when his phone lit up and he turned it away from me. Have you ever had that feeling? That quiet voice in your head that won't leave you alone? The one that whispers, "Something isn't right"? I tried to silence it, tried to bury it under trust, under years of shared laughter and memories. But no matter how hard I tried, it kept clawing back to the surface. Looking back now, I wonder if he thought I would never notice. If he believed I was too blind, too naive, too in love to ever suspect. Maybe he thought he was clever, that his lies were airtight. But lies have a way of unraveling. They can be hidden for a while, tucked into the corners of late-night excuses and half-smiles, but the truth has a way of breaking through, no matter how carefully it's buried. I didn't know it then, but I was standing at the edge of a story that would consume me. A story of betrayal so sharp it cut through every illusion I had. A story of revenge so deliberate it left him speechless. And though I wouldn't realize it until much later, it was also a story about me. About the strength I never knew I had. About the way pain can carve you open and make room for something new. The night it all began was ordinary, almost painfully so. The kind of night you forget before it even ends. The hum of the television in the background, his voice drifting through the room, my hands busy with the small, simple chores of life. I didn't know it then, but that night would be the last time I looked at him and saw only the man I loved. Soon, I would see the truth. They say hindsight is 20/20, and now I can look back and see the cracks forming long before they split wide open. The late nights at work. The guarded tone when I asked simple questions. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. I told myself it was stress, that we'd been through worse and survived, but I was wrong. And here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt because of what they did. It hurts because of who they were supposed to be. He wasn't just a partner. He was the person I trusted above everyone else. The person I leaned on when life grew heavy. The one I believed would never, ever be the reason I broke. Yet there I was, standing on the edge of a truth I wasn't ready to face. And even then, before I uncovered the lies, before I gathered the proof, before the plan for revenge even crossed my mind, I knew deep down, the life I thought I had was already gone. This is not just a story about heartbreak. It's about justice. About refusing to stay silent when the one you trusted most thought he could shatter you and walk away unscathed. It's about the way betrayal sharpens you, how it forces you to see yourself clearly, maybe for the first time. And if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever felt that sting of doubt in your chest, then you already know how it begins. It begins with a question, a small nagging question that refuses to let go, a question that keeps you awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the person breathing beside you is really who you think they are. For me, that question turned into a journey through suspicion, discovery, and heartbreak. A journey that would end in a moment so explosive, so undeniable, that it left him standing in silence, stripped of every lie he had built. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before the revenge, before the revelation, there was doubt. And doubt, as I learned, is the seed from which betrayal grows. I didn't know it then, but my world was about to fracture. And once it did, nothing would ever be the same again. When I look back to the beginning, it's almost painful to remember how much love and trust I had for him. I think that's what makes betrayal so devastating. It doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the people we let closest to our hearts. We didn't meet in some dramatic or extraordinary way. It was ordinary, almost simple. A chance introduction through mutual friends. A casual conversation that stretched longer than either of us expected. A laugh that felt too easy to ignore. I didn't know then that a single evening would spiral into years of shared memories, a relationship that would define so much of my life. From the start, he knew how to make me feel safe. He had that charm, the kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room who mattered. I remember the way he listened when I spoke, not just nodding along, but really listening. It felt rare. It felt genuine. And I let my guard down in ways I hadn't with anyone before. Our first dates were nothing special to anyone else, but to me, they were magic. Long walks when the air was crisp, late-night drives with music playing softly in the background, whispered conversations about dreams and fears. He painted pictures of a future I didn't just want. I believed in it. I believed in him. The early days of love are like a haze. You don't see flaws, or if you do, they seem small, almost endearing. He was forgetful sometimes, a little too quick to make excuses when he was late, but back then I brushed it off. Everyone has their quirks, I told myself. Besides, he always made up for it with a smile, with a promise, with words that felt too sweet to doubt. I trusted him in a way that I didn't even question. He became the person I leaned on when life felt heavy, the one I wanted to share every joy with, every setback, every mundane detail of my day. And he gave me the same in return, or so it seemed. He'd call me just to hear my voice, send me messages in the middle of the day, tell me I was his safe place in a world that sometimes felt too cruel. We built traditions together. Small things, but they mattered. Sunday breakfasts at our favorite cafe, movie nights with popcorn spilling across the couch, little notes left on the fridge when one of us had an early morning. They were gestures that whispered, "I care, I see you, I choose you." And I held on to them like proof that what we had was real. There were times I would catch myself wondering how I got so lucky. Friends would tell me how jealous they were, how rare it was to find someone so thoughtful, so attentive. I'd smile, proud and a little smug, as though I had uncovered some hidden treasure in a world where so many were still searching. When he talked about the future, it was always with we, never I. We would travel, we would buy a house, we would start a family. He made me believe that my dreams weren't just mine to carry anymore. They were ours. Shared. Safe. It's funny, isn't it? How trust feels unshakable when you're in it. How you can look at someone and think, this is it. This is home. That was how I felt with him. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was him. Even our fights, when they happened, felt like proof of how strong we were. They were rare, small disagreements about nothing that really mattered. And even in those moments, he knew how to pull me back in. A hug, an apology, the way he looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold sincerity. I never doubted it, not once. In those days, if someone had told me he would betray me, I would have laughed. I would have defended him with everything I had. Because to me, he wasn't just a partner. He was the person I trusted with my whole heart, with my whole life. I think that's what makes the contrast so sharp. To remember how much love and safety I felt, only to discover later that it was built on cracks I couldn't see. That's the cruelty of betrayal. It steals not just your present, but your past. Because once the truth comes out, even the happy memories feel tainted, like they've been rewritten with a darker ink. But in those early days, before the lies revealed themselves, I didn't know any of that. All I knew was love. All I knew was trust. I believed in him with everything I had. And that belief became the foundation of the storm that was waiting for me just ahead. Because the higher you build your trust, the harder it shatters when it falls. And mine was about to come crashing down in ways I never imagined. It started small, the kind of things you almost don't notice at first. A late reply to a message, a change in tone you can't quite put your finger on, a smile that seems practiced instead of real. If you've ever been in love, you'll understand what I mean. How even the tiniest shift in someone you care about feels enormous, like a string pulled too tight. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. I reminded myself how good we were together, how much we had built. I thought, maybe he's just stressed. Maybe work is overwhelming. Maybe I'm imagining things. Because when you love someone, you want to believe the best in them. You want to believe that nothing is wrong, that the foundation you've built is unshakable. But the signs kept growing, subtle at first, then harder to ignore. His phone became a secret I wasn't allowed to touch anymore. Once upon a time, he'd leave it lying around, unlocked, without a care in the world. But now, it was always face down, always in his pocket, always guarded like it held the answers to questions I hadn't even asked yet, and the nights got longer. Late meetings, he would say. Extra work to finish. At first, I believed him. I wanted to. But as the excuses piled up, they began to sound rehearsed, like lines read from a script. When he came home, he carried an energy I didn't recognize. Some nights, he was overly affectionate, almost too much, as though trying to erase the doubt before it formed. Other nights, he was distant, distracted, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share. I'd ask what was wrong, and he'd brush it off with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The conversations changed too. We used to talk about everything, the big dreams, the silly little things. But now our talks were shorter, shallow. He seemed impatient, like my words were an interruption instead of a connection. And when I pressed, he'd grow defensive, quick to anger in ways that left me stunned. One evening, I caught the faintest scent of perfume that wasn't mine. Just a trace, lingering on his shirt collar. My heart sank, but my mind rushed to defend him. Maybe it was from someone at work. Maybe he brushed past someone in a crowded place. I wanted so badly to believe the innocence of it, to cling to the comfort of denial. But the doubts were like whispers in the dark. Quiet at first, then louder, until they became impossible to ignore. I remember lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, asking myself if I was being paranoid. Was I losing my mind? Was I inventing problems where none existed? But then he'd roll over, turning his back to me, and the silence between us felt heavier than any words. There were moments when I tried to catch him, not directly, but in small ways. Asking casual questions about his day, about the people he'd been with. And every time there was a flicker in his eyes, a hesitation too brief for most to notice. But I noticed. I knew his rhythms, his expressions, the way his voice changed when he was hiding something. He became distant from my friends too. Once he'd been eager to join in, to be a part of every gathering. But now, he avoided them, made excuses, claimed he was too tired or too busy. It was as though he didn't want to be around anyone who might see through him. And deep down, I think I already knew. There's a moment when you're living in suspicion, where your heart already has the answer, but your mind refuses to accept it. Because the truth would hurt too much. Because admitting it means your world will shatter. I found myself watching him more closely, memorizing every detail, every inconsistency. A slip of the tongue, a hesitation before answering, a message he cleared too quickly from his phone. It was all there, small pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to put together, and yet I couldn't stop. The tension between us grew heavier with each passing day. I tried to talk to him, tried to reach for the man I thought I knew, but he slipped further away. And the more I reached, the more distant he became. I remember one night in particular. We were sitting at dinner, the air thick with silence. I asked him about work, about a project he'd been complaining about for weeks. He looked at me blankly, as if he didn't even remember what he had told me before. That was the moment I realized his lies weren't even careful anymore. He wasn't trying to keep the story straight. And that's when fear turned into something sharper. Anger. I was no longer asking myself if something was wrong. I knew it was. The only question left was how deep it went, and how much I was willing to uncover. Because once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. And though I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, the truth was already there, waiting for me. I just had to be brave enough to face it. The truth never arrives gently. It doesn't knock on the door and wait for you to answer. It crashes in, uninvited, tearing through every wall you've built, and it leaves nothing the same once it's inside. For weeks, I had lived in that space between doubt and denial. My heart whispered that something was wrong, but my mind begged me to hold on. And then one night, everything I feared came rushing into the light. It was late, long past the time he usually came home. I had tried calling him, but the calls went unanswered. My stomach twisted with each passing hour, dread curling tighter around me. I told myself I would not check his phone if he left it lying around again. I didn't want to be that person, suspicious and desperate. But when he finally stumbled through the door, distracted and careless, and left his jacket tossed over the chair with his phone slipping out of the pocket, I couldn't look away. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. A message preview, small but sharp, pierced through me like a blade. I miss you already. Can't wait to see you again. My breath caught. The room spun. I reached for the phone with shaking hands, each movement heavy, deliberate, as though I already knew I was about to shatter my own heart. And there it was, thread after thread of messages, words of affection, inside jokes, late-night plans. Pictures I couldn't bear to stare at but couldn't look away from either. Evidence of a life he was living outside of me. My chest ached in a way I had never felt before. It wasn't just pain, it was betrayal burning in my veins. My mind screamed questions I couldn't answer. How long? Why? Was everything we had a lie? I remember sitting there in the dim light of the living room, the phone glowing in my hands, while he slept soundly in the next room. How could he rest so easily while my world was breaking apart? How could he look me in the eyes every day and tell me he loved me while writing those words to someone else? The anger came slow, but it grew with every second I read those messages. At first, it was disbelief, then heartbreak, and finally, a fury so sharp it steadied me. My tears dried up, replaced by a cold clarity. I had the truth now, undeniable and raw, and there was no going back. The days that followed felt unreal, like I was walking through a life that no longer belonged to me. I'd watch him talk, laugh, move around our home, and all I could see were the lies stitched into every smile. I heard the echoes of his late-night whispers to her, disguised as work calls or sudden errands. And yet, he carried on, confident in the illusion he had built. He didn't know I had seen it all. He didn't know I had stepped out of the fog and into the storm. One evening, I decided to test him. I asked simple questions, ones I already knew the answers to. Where had he been the night before? Who was he with? His answers came smoothly, polished lies rolling off his tongue as though he had practiced them 100 times. I studied his face, the calm mask he wore so well, and I felt something shift inside me. The love I once had was being replaced by something else. Resolve. That was the night I stopped doubting myself. The night I realized that my instincts had been right all along. The night the betrayal was no longer a suspicion, but a truth carved into stone. I broke down later, alone in the dark. My body shook as silent sobs racked through me, the weight of years crashing down all at once. Every moment we had shared, every promise he had made, every "I love you" he had whispered, it all felt poisoned now. And the cruelest part was realizing that while I had been living in devotion, he had been living in deception. But even in that heartbreak, something else was born. A determination I didn't know I had. He thought he could play me for a fool, thought I would stay blind, thought his lies were untouchable. But he was wrong. I wiped my tears and looked at myself in the mirror, my eyes red but steady. I told myself that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. I wouldn't confront him yet, not until I was ready, not until I had a plan. Because if betrayal is sharp, revenge can be sharper. And so I tucked the truth away like a weapon. I carried it with me silently, waiting for the moment when the lies would unravel on my terms, not his. The heartbreak was real, the anger undeniable. But beneath it all, there was a new strength rising. The kind that comes only when you've been broken and decide you will not stay broken. That night, staring at the phone that had exposed everything, I made a choice. I would no longer be the victim of his betrayal. I would become the author of his downfall. He just didn't know it yet. The moment I uncovered the truth, a quiet war began inside me. Part of me wanted to confront him right then and there, to scream and throw every lie back in his face. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being played, whispered something different. Wait. Be patient. Make it count. At first, I didn't know what that meant. I was used to reacting with emotion, with my heart leading the way. But betrayal changes you. It sharpens you. It makes you see things clearly. And as the days passed, I realized my anger wasn't a fire to burn out quickly. It was fuel, and I was going to use it. I began with silence. He didn't know that I knew. He still moved through our life like nothing had changed, still played the role of the loving partner. That was fine. Let him believe he was safe. Let him keep spinning his lies while I prepared the truth. The first step was gathering evidence. I already had the messages I'd seen on his phone, but I needed more. Screenshots, call logs, little inconsistencies in his stories. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. Every time he slipped, I wrote it down. Every time he forgot a detail, I noted the change. I became an observer in my own relationship, collecting pieces of a puzzle he didn't even know I was putting together. And the more I looked, the more I found. Photos saved in hidden folders, receipts that didn't match the excuses. Even his credit card bills told stories he never intended to share. It was all there, waiting to be uncovered. I remember the strange calm that settled over me during those weeks. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't begging for answers. I was steady, deliberate, almost cold. It was as though my heartbreak had frozen into resolve. But revenge isn't just about evidence. It's about timing. I didn't want to simply confront him in private. That would give him room to twist the truth, to cry and beg and spin another story. No, I wanted something undeniable, something public, something that would strip away every mask he had so carefully built. That's when the idea began to take shape. We had an upcoming gathering, a dinner with close friends and family. The kind of night he loved, where he could play the charming partner, the man who seemed perfect. What better place to reveal the truth? What better stage for the lies to collapse than the very room where he thought he was admired? I started preparing quietly. I gathered the messages into a neat folder, screenshots ready to be displayed. I collected the photos, the receipts, the call logs. I created a trail so clear that even the best liar in the world couldn't explain it away. And while I prepared, I played my role. I smiled when he smiled. I asked about his day. I kissed him goodnight. I let him believe that I was still blind, still in love, still his. It wasn't easy. Some nights, the weight of the truth pressed down so hard I could barely breathe. But I reminded myself of the goal. I reminded myself that patience was power. There were moments when he grew careless, moments when I almost laughed at how obvious his lies had become. He'd tell me he was working late, but I already had the receipt from the restaurant he'd been at. He'd claim he was too tired for dinner, and I'd already seen the messages where he promised her he'd make time. The lies piled up, and so did my evidence. Each piece was another brick in the wall I was building, one that would eventually close in around him. And all the while, I thought about what I wanted from the end of the story. It wasn't to scream or to fight. It wasn't even to hear an apology, because apologies mean nothing when they're built on betrayal. No, what I wanted was clarity. I wanted the truth out in the open, undeniable, where everyone could see it. I wanted him stripped of the power he thought he held over me. And most of all, I wanted freedom. The night before the dinner, I sat alone, going over everything one last time. My heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. Tomorrow, the mask would fall. Tomorrow, the man who thought he could deceive me would finally see that I was not the fool he believed I was. It was a strange feeling, knowing that the storm was coming, and that I was the one who had called it. But beneath the tension, there was a calm certainty. I was ready. The plan was set, the evidence was prepared, and the stage was waiting. All that was left was to watch it unfold. The night of the dinner arrived. I remember standing in front of the mirror, fixing my clothes, steadying my breath. On the outside, I looked calm, composed even. But inside, my heart pounded with a rhythm that was half fear, half anticipation. This was the night everything would change. The house filled quickly. Friends, family, laughter, the clinking of glasses. It all felt like any other gathering. He played his role perfectly, smiling, joking, pouring drinks as though nothing was wrong. Watching him, I almost marveled at his performance. Almost. Because I knew the truth behind the mask, and soon everyone else would too. I stayed quiet at first, blending into the background. Let him shine, I told myself. Let him enjoy these last moments of his illusion. I watched him move from person to person, soaking in the admiration, the easy charm that had fooled so many. And for a moment, I wondered how many times he had fooled me in the same way. Dinner was served, conversations buzzed, and the night unfolded just as he expected. Until it didn't. When the plates were cleared and the chatter softened, I stood. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't tremble. Because this wasn't a moment for weakness. It was a moment for truth. I looked around the room at the people who mattered most in our lives. Friends who thought we were perfect. Family who believed in our love. I took a deep breath and said, "There's something I need to share." The room grew quiet, curiosity flickering across their faces. He glanced at me, a hint of confusion in his eyes, maybe even fear, but he covered it quickly, with that same easy smile. I pulled out my phone, opened the folder I had prepared, and let the first image appear on the screen. A screenshot of his messages. His words to her, full of promises, full of intimacy he had denied me. Gasps rippled through the room. He shifted uncomfortably. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "This," I said, scrolling to the next screenshot, "is the truth you've been hiding." Message after message appeared, receipts, photos, call logs, each one a piece of the puzzle, each one undeniable. The room fell into silence except for the sharp sound of evidence cutting through his lies. He tried to speak, first in denial, then in excuses. But every time he opened his mouth, I answered with another fact, another proof, another reminder that his web of lies had already unraveled. His charm faltered. His smile disappeared. And for the first time, I saw him as he truly was. Not confident, not powerful, but small. Exposed. The people around us shifted, their admiration gone, replaced with shock, disappointment, even pity. His carefully crafted image shattered before their eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply laid out the truth, piece by piece, until the weight of it crushed every defense he tried to build. By the time I finished, the room was still. The silence wasn't just awkward. It was heavy, suffocating. Everyone could see the truth now. There was no more pretending. He looked at me then, desperate, his eyes pleading. But I didn't flinch. I didn't soften. Because this wasn't about saving him. It was about saving myself. I turned to the people in the room, my voice steady. I loved him. I trusted him. And this is what he did in return. Gasps again. Whispers. A few friends shook their heads in disbelief. Family members exchanged glances filled with anger and sympathy. And then slowly I sat back down. My work was done. The rest of the night unfolded like a slow collapse. He tried to recover, tried to laugh it off, tried to explain. But every attempt fell flat. The evidence was too clear, the lies too exposed. No one believed him anymore. I didn't need to say another word. I had already said everything. As the guests began to leave, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. It wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was something deeper, a release. The burden of secrecy was gone. The power he once held over me had dissolved in the light of truth. He stood in the corner, isolated, his mask gone, his pride broken. And for the first time in a long time, I looked at him and felt nothing. No love, no anger, just emptiness. And maybe that was the real victory. Not the exposure, not the gasps or the shock, but the simple fact that I was free. That night, as I closed the door behind the last guest, I knew the revenge had been executed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was precise, undeniable, final. And it was enough. The night of the reckoning came faster than I expected. All my planning, all the careful silence, all the patience I had forced myself to carry, it led to this moment. I woke up that morning with a strange calm, as if my body knew what was about to happen. No more doubts, no more second-guessing. Tonight, everything would be exposed. The dinner gathering was perfect. Friends, family, people who had always believed in us as a couple. He thrived in moments like these. He loved being the center of attention, the charming partner everyone envied. I watched him laughing, smiling, pouring wine, and for a brief second, I wondered if he knew. If maybe deep down, he could feel the storm building around him. But then I saw the smug confidence in his eyes, and I knew he still believed he was untouchable. I let him have his moment. I let him bask in the admiration, soaking in the image of the man he pretended to be. Because I wanted him to fall from the highest point. I wanted him to crash so hard that the sound of it would echo in his memory forever. As the plates were cleared, I stood. My heart was steady. My voice was clear. "There's something I need to share with everyone," I said. The room fell silent. Forks clinked against plates. Eyes turned toward me. He glanced at me with a small, confused smile, as though I was about to toast to him. He didn't know what was coming. I reached for my phone and opened the folder I had prepared. The first screenshot glowed on the screen. His words to her, filled with affection he had denied me. I held it up. Gasps rippled across the table. Whispers followed. "What is this?" he asked, a nervous laugh breaking through his voice. "This," I said, scrolling to the next image, "is the truth you've been hiding." One by one, I revealed the messages, the late-night promises, the photos he thought were hidden, the receipts from restaurants he had never mentioned, call logs that painted a story of lies. Each piece of evidence slammed down like a hammer, breaking apart the false image he had built. He tried to interrupt. At first, it was denial. "That's not real. You're twisting things." Then excuses. "It's not what it looks like." Then desperation. "Please, not here, let's talk privately." But it was too late. Every time he opened his mouth, I showed another piece of truth. He couldn't outrun it. He couldn't cover it up. His mask slipped with every passing second until there was nothing left but the raw, exposed betrayal. The room shifted. Friends who once admired him now stared in shock. Family who had trusted him now shook their heads in disbelief. The silence was heavier than any scream. And through it all, I stood calm, steady, unshaken. He looked at me then, his charm gone, his confidence shattered. His eyes begged for mercy. But there was none left to give. I had loved him once. I had trusted him once. And he had destroyed both. "I wanted everyone to see who you really are," I said quietly. "Not the mask you wear, not the lies you tell, the truth." And with that, I sat down. The rest of the night crumbled around him. He tried to recover, tried to laugh it off, tried to gather sympathy. But the evidence was too strong. No one believed him anymore. Every excuse fell flat. Every attempt at saving face only made him look smaller. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to scream. My revenge wasn't in loud words. It was in silence, in the undeniable truth I had laid bare. I had stripped him of the power he thought he held. I had shown the world what he really was. By the time the last guest left, he was a broken image of himself, standing in the corner with nothing but shame. And me? I felt lighter. Not happy, not victorious, but free. That was the execution of my revenge. Not a scene of chaos, not a battle of words, but a calm, calculated unveiling. It was the kind of justice that needed no further explanation. And it was enough. The air in the room felt heavy after the truth was laid bare. You could almost hear the weight of silence pressing down on everyone. He stood there, caught between denial and desperation, his carefully crafted world crumbling right in front of him. This was the moment, the point of no return, the climax of everything I had endured, everything I had planned. He tried again to regain control. "Please listen," he said, his voice breaking. "You don't understand. It wasn't what you think." But no one moved. No one nodded. His words, once so smooth, now sounded hollow. His audience, our friends, our family, watched him with eyes that no longer believed, and that was the sharpest cut of all. He thrived on admiration. He lived for approval, and now there was none. I didn't need to say much anymore. My silence spoke louder than anything. I had already delivered the evidence, the story, the betrayal laid out in full. His downfall didn't come from me yelling or crying or throwing things. It came from the stillness, from the undeniable truth staring back at him from every shocked face in the room. I could see the panic in his eyes as realization settled in. He wasn't just losing me. He was losing the respect of everyone who mattered. His lies, his double life, his false charm, all of it dissolved in a single evening. He turned to me then, his voice trembling. Can we talk?" Just the two of us? Please. But I didn't move. I looked at him, steady, unflinching. There's nothing left to say. That was when it hit him. Truly hit him. The room, the people, the life he thought he controlled, it was gone. He had no more cards to play, no more stories to twist. He was exposed and there was no coming back from it. He sank into his chair, his shoulders slumped, his hands trembling against the table. The man who once strutted through life with pride now sat small, defeated, stripped of the illusion he had clung to. And me? I felt something shift inside. For so long I had carried anger, pain, betrayal. I thought this moment would feel like fire, like an explosion of rage. But instead it felt like release. The climax wasn't about destroying him. It was about freeing myself. The whispers in the room grew louder. Some guests avoided his eyes. Others looked at me with quiet sympathy, admiration even, for the strength it had taken to stand there and reveal the truth. He heard it too, the murmurs, the judgment. He knew he could never repair the damage. And that was justice. Not loud, not violent, but undeniable. I stood once more, my voice steady, my words deliberate. You thought you could betray me and still walk away untouched. But lies always find their way to the surface. And tonight they did. He lowered his head, unable to look at me. For the first time, he was truly powerless. That was the climax. The moment everything shifted. The betrayer unmasked. The truth undeniable. The weight lifted. And though my heart still ached, though the scars would take time to heal, I knew I had reclaimed something important. Myself. My dignity. My voice. Justice had been served, not with fury, but with truth. And in that moment, standing in the wreckage of his lies, I knew I had won. When the last guest left that night, I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing in the silence. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air felt lighter. The lies that had filled my home like smoke were gone, cleared away by truth. He sat in the living room, silent, broken. Once, the sight of him like that might have pulled at me. Once, I would have rushed to comfort him, to fix what was broken. But that part of me was gone. What remained was clarity. I walked past him without a word, up the stairs, into our bedroom. My bedroom now. I packed a small bag, not because I was leaving forever, but because I wanted him to see that I could walk away at any moment. I wanted him to know that he no longer held any power over me. The next morning, the world looked different. The pain was still there, of course. Betrayal leaves scars that don't disappear overnight. But beneath the hurt was something stronger, a sense of peace. I had faced the truth. I had refused to stay silent. I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. People called, texted, reached out. Some offered sympathy, others shared stories of their own heartbreak. It surprised me how many people carried similar wounds, how many had been betrayed but never found the courage to speak. That's when I realized something important. My story wasn't just mine. It was bigger. It was proof that silence protects no one except the liar. He tried, of course, in the days that followed. Apologies, excuses, promises that it would never happen again. But the words fell flat. Once trust is broken, it can't be glued back together with empty promises. It doesn't matter how many times someone says, "I am sorry," when their actions scream otherwise. I didn't scream at him. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. My decision was made, my boundaries clear. I told him simply, "You showed me who you are, and I believe you." That was the end of it. Life after betrayal isn't easy. There are nights when the memories sneak in, when I wonder how I missed the signs for so long, when I question if I'll ever trust again. But there's also strength in survival. There's power in knowing I didn't let his betrayal define me. If there's one thing I've learned, it is this. Betrayal is indeed just about someone breaking your trust. It is about what you choose to do afterward. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it sharpen you. I chose the latter. The moral of my story isn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It isn't about humiliation or anger. It's about reclaiming control when someone thinks they've taken it from you. It's about showing yourself that you are stronger than the lies, stronger than the heartbreak, stronger than the betrayal. Revenge doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is the truth. Calm, undeniable, and final. And so I moved forward, day by day, step by step, not looking back with regret, but looking forward with resolve. Because if betrayal teaches you anything, it's this. You cannot control what someone does to you, but you can always control how you rise after the fall. In the end, that was my victory. Not that he was exposed, not that others saw his lies, but that I walked away with my dignity intact, stronger than I had ever been. And if you're listening, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, let my story remind you. You are not powerless. You are not trapped. You have the strength to speak, to stand, to rise. Because the truth always finds its way to the surface. And when it does, it will set you free.